Story 1. Good evening everyone, and a warm welcome back to Room 13 this evening. We're venturing into the most shadowy corners of America's small towns to explore 10 of the most unsettling true horror stories ever put on record. These testimonies come straight from census workers, teachers, pharmacists, and ordinary people who accidentally found themselves in communities where reality seems twisted past all recognition. From midnight population counts in West Virginia that never seem to add up, to prescription medications in Kansas for diseases that don't exist. Each story stands as a verified nightmare that defies any logical explanation. These are not urban legends or simple campfire tales, but documented experiences from real Americans who encountered something in these forgotten places that forever altered their understanding of what is possible. The truth of these accounts has been confirmed through official records, employment databases, and witness testimonies that paint a picture of small-town America where the impossible becomes an inevitable fact of life. If you're new to our channel, remember to subscribe to Room 13 for daily true horror content that will have you questioning the very world around you. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss the moment when darkness decides to reveal its secrets. Now, let us step into the hidden America that exists just beyond the main highways, where small-town hospitality often masks terrors that most people never live long enough to report. According to official records from the U.S. Census Bureau, Granville Hollow, West Virginia, has a population of exactly 847 people. But every 10 years, when the census workers arrive to complete their count, they consistently find 1,200 residents. Those extra 353 individuals only ever appear after the clock strikes midnight. Marcus Webb had been conducting federal census counts for 12 years when he received his assignment for Granville Hollow in March of 2020. This small Appalachian community was nestled in a valley between two ridges, reachable only by a winding mountain road that frequently seemed to vanish into the mist. His supervisor had warned him that the area was difficult to navigate and that previous workers had reported unusual circumstances. But Marcus prided himself on his thoroughness. He had never once failed to complete an accurate count, and he wasn't about to start now. The drive from Charleston took nearly 4 hours, mostly along roads that grew increasingly narrow, cutting through dense forest and over creeks that didn't appear on any map Marcus could find. When he finally reached Granville Hollow, the sun was already beginning to set behind the western ridge, casting long shadows across the valley floor. The town itself was smaller than he'd anticipated, made up of perhaps 50 houses scattered along a single main road. A general store with a hand-painted sign seemed to be the center of commerce, and a white-clapboard church with a tall steeple stood at the far end of town like a silent sentinel watching over the community. Marcus parked his government-issued sedan in front of the general store and stepped out, stretching his legs after the long drive. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the earthy scent of recent rain and decomposing leaves. A few residents moved about their evening routines, closing shop windows and heading home for dinner. They nodded politely when they saw him, but there was something reserved in their acknowledgments, as if they were sizing him up for reasons he couldn't possibly understand. The proprietor of the general store, a weathered man in his 60s named Henry Caldwell, greeted Marcus with cautious friendliness when he entered to introduce himself. The store was cramped but well stocked, with shelves lined with canned goods, hunting supplies, and basic necessities. A pot-bellied stove in the corner radiated warmth, and several older men sat around it in mismatched chairs, playing checkers and nursing cups of coffee that had clearly been brewing for hours. "Census man, are you?" Henry asked, wiping his hands on a well-worn apron. "Been expecting you for weeks now. Heard through the grapevine that someone would be coming around eventually." Marcus nodded and pulled out his identification. "Marcus Webb, U.S. Census Bureau. I'll be conducting the official count for Granville Hollow over the next few days. I understand the population is listed as 847 residents." Henry exchanged a quick glance with the men around the stove, and Marcus caught something in that look he couldn't quite interpret. "That sounds about right," Henry said carefully. "Most folks live up the holloways, scattered through the hills. Take some walking to get to all of them." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied. "I've been doing this for 12 years, so I'm used to difficult terrain. Is there a motel or boarding house where I can stay while I conduct the count?" One of the men around the stove, a thin fellow with a gray beard and penetrating blue eyes, spoke up without looking away from the checkerboard. "Widow Morrison rents out a room above the old pharmacy building. Clean beds, decent cooking. Just tell her that Ezra sent you." Marcus thanked them and made his way to the pharmacy building, which turned out to be a narrow two-story structure wedged between a hardware store and what appeared to be an abandoned barber shop. The pharmacy itself had been closed for years, judging by the dusty windows and faded signs, but a side door led to a staircase that climbed to the second floor. Mrs. Morrison was a pleasant woman in her 70s who seemed delighted to have a visitor. She showed him to a small but comfortable room with a view of the main street and the church beyond. "You'll find the folks here friendly enough," she said as she handed him a key. "Just remember that we keep early hours. Most everyone is in bed by 9, especially this time of year." Marcus spent his first evening reviewing his maps and planning his route through the community. According to his files, Granville Hollow had been established in the 1880s as a logging town. Though the timber industry had long since moved on, the population had remained relatively stable for decades, hovering between 800 and 900 residents, according to previous census counts. What struck him as odd was the consistency of that number. Most small rural communities experience some fluctuation over the decades as young people move away and older residents pass on, but Granville Hollow seemed to maintain an almost supernatural stability. He began his official count the next morning, working systematically through the houses along the main road before venturing into the network of gravel lanes and dirt paths that led deeper into the hollow. The residents he encountered were cooperative but reserved, answering his questions with precise brevity and offering little in the way of casual conversation. By the end of his first full day, he had counted 127 people living in 43 households, all of whom had been born and raised in the area. The second day took him farther up the hollow, where the houses became increasingly sparse and the terrain more challenging. Many of the residents here were elderly, living alone in cabins that had been in their families for generations. They treated Marcus with the same polite distance he had encountered in town, but he began to notice something else in their manner. When he asked about neighbors or other families living nearby, their directions were always precise and their counts were always exact. No one ever said "I think" or "maybe" or "around 10 people." They always knew exactly how many people lived in each household, and they always knew exactly where to find them. By the evening of his third day, Marcus had counted 847 residents, matching the official population figure exactly. He was satisfied with his work and planned to spend one more day double-checking his numbers before filing his final report. He had dinner at the general store where Henry Caldwell served him a plate of pot roast and vegetables while the same group of older men maintained their eternal checker game around the stove. "Finished up your counting?" Henry asked as he refilled Marcus's coffee cup. "Just about," Marcus replied. 847, just like the records show. "Very consistent community you have here." Again, he caught that look passing between Henry and the other men. This time, Ezra spoke directly to him. "You might want to take another walk tonight," the old man said, still studying the checkerboard. "Sometimes folks come out in the evening that you might not see during the day." Marcus considered this advice as he walked back to his room above the old pharmacy. It was possible that he had missed some residents who worked night shifts or kept unusual hours. Thoroughness was his professional obligation, and he prided himself on never leaving a stone unturned. After resting for a few hours, he decided to take Ezra's suggestion and conduct an evening count to ensure he hadn't missed anyone. He set out at 10 o'clock, carrying a flashlight and his clipboard, retracing the routes he had taken during his daytime surveys. The night was clear and cold, with a nearly full moon providing adequate visibility along the main road. Most of the houses he had visited during the day showed lights in their windows, and he could see families settling in for the evening. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until he reached the far end of town near the White Church. Along a dirt lane that he was certain he had explored thoroughly during the day, stood a house that he did not remember seeing before. It was a modest two-story home with yellow siding and a wraparound porch, similar in style to many of the other houses in Granville Hollow. Warm light glowed from the windows, and smoke rose from the chimney. A mailbox at the end of the driveway bore the name Patterson. Marcus approached the front door, puzzled by his apparent oversight. He prided himself on his attention to detail, and it seemed impossible that he could have missed an entire household during his systematic survey. When he knocked, the door was answered by a middle-aged woman with graying hair and kind eyes. "Good evening," Marcus said, showing his identification. "I'm Marcus Webb from the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm conducting the official count for Granville Hollow, and I believe I may have missed your household during my daytime survey. Would you mind answering a few questions?" The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret Patterson, seemed entirely unsurprised by his visit. She invited him inside, where he met her husband, Robert, and their teenage son, Daniel. They answered his questions with the same precise courtesy he had encountered throughout the community, providing exact birth dates, occupation, information, and length of residence. According to Margaret, they had lived in the house for 15 years, and before that had resided with Robert's parents in a cabin farther up the hollow dot. As Marcus completed his interview and prepared to leave, Daniel Patterson walked him to the door. The boy appeared to be about 17, with the lean build and weathered hands of someone accustomed to outdoor work. "Mr. Webb," Daniel said quietly, glancing back toward the house to ensure his parents were not listening, "you should probably keep walking tonight. There are more of us out here than you found during the day." Marcus thanked him and continued his evening survey. Over the next 3 hours, he encountered 353 additional residents living in houses that he was absolutely certain he had not seen during his daytime counts. Each household was fully established with mailboxes, utility connections, and all the normal indicators of permanent residence. The residents he met were cooperative and seemingly normal, though they all shared the same matter-of-fact attitude about his nighttime visit, as those census workers routinely conducted surveys at midnight. By 2 in the morning, Marcus had documented exactly 1,200 residents of Granville Hollow. He returned to his room above the pharmacy, exhausted and deeply confused by what he had experienced. He had been conducting census work for over a decade, and he had never encountered anything like the systematic discrepancy between his daytime and nighttime counts. The next morning, Marcus decided to verify his nighttime findings by revisiting the houses he had surveyed after dark. He began with the Patterson residence, following the same dirt lane he had taken the night before. When he reached the location where the house had stood, he found only an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and brambles. The mailbox was gone, the driveway had disappeared, and there was no indication that a structure had ever existed on the site. Increasingly alarmed, Marcus spent the entire day attempting to relocate the 353 additional residents he had counted during his nighttime survey. Every single house had vanished. Every dirt lane and gravel driveway had disappeared. Even his own handwritten notes from the previous evening seemed to confirm interviews with people who, according to all physical evidence, did not exist. That evening, Marcus confronted Henry Caldwell at the general store, spreading his documentation across the counter and demanding an explanation for what he had experienced. Henry studied the papers for a long moment before looking up at Marcus with an expression of weary resignation. "How many years have you been doing this job, son?" 12 years, Marcus replied, "and I have never encountered anything like this in my entire career, and you probably never will again," Henry said. "Granville Hollow is different. Always has been. Some places just are." Ezra looked up from his checker game and addressed Marcus directly for the second time. "The count always comes out the same, does it not? 847 during the day, 353 at night." "On," Marcus stared at him. "How did you know the exact numbers?" "Because it is always the same," Ezra replied. "Every 10 years, the census man comes, and every 10 years he counts the same numbers, day folks and night folks. Both groups live here, just at different times." "That is impossible," Marcus said. "Houses do not disappear and reappear. People do not exist only at night." Henry shrugged. "You have the count. File your report. Put down whatever number makes sense to your government, but do not try to understand it, because understanding it means becoming part of it." Marcus left Granville Hollow the following morning, filing a report that listed the official population as 847 residents. He made no mention of his nighttime survey or the additional 353 people he had encountered after dark. He told himself that exhaustion and stress had caused him to hallucinate or become confused, though he knew that explanation did not account for the physical evidence he had documented. 3 months later, Marcus received a letter forwarded through the Census Bureau from Daniel Patterson in Granville Hollow. The letter contained no return address and consisted of a single sentence written in careful handwriting. "Thank you for not reporting all of us." Marcus filed the letter away and never spoke of his experience in Granville Hollow to anyone. But every 10 years, when the census data is compiled, he checks the official count for that small West Virginia community. It never changes. 847 residents during the day, 353 additional residents counted only by those brave enough or foolish enough to survey the community after midnight. The population of Granville Hollow, according to official records, remains 847. But Marcus Webb knows the truth. Some communities exist in the spaces between day and night, where the impossible becomes routine, and the supernatural hides behind precise bureaucratic numbers that never change. No matter how many years pass or how many census workers venture into the hollow after dark. Story 2. When pharmacist Elena Rodriguez moved to Millbrook, Kansas, she noticed something odd about the prescriptions. Every single resident was taking the same medication, and when she looked up what it was for, the condition did not exist. Elena had spent 8 years working at a chain in Kansas City before the opportunity in Millbrook presented itself. The previous pharmacist, Dr. Harold Keene, had run the town's only pharmacy for over 30 years before his sudden retirement due to health concerns. The job posting had been surprisingly generous in its compensation package, offering nearly double what Elena earned in the city, plus full relocation assistance and a guaranteed 5-year contract. For a single mother raising 2 teenagers, the financial security was too appealing to ignore. The drive from Kansas City took 3 hours through increasingly rural countryside, past endless fields of wheat and corn stretching to the horizon in every direction. Millbrook itself was typical of small Kansas. Farming communities with a population of just over 2,000 residents clustered around a main street lined with brick storefronts that dated back to the early 1900s. The pharmacy occupied a corner building that had clearly been the town's pride at one time, with large windows, decorative stonework, and Keene Pharmacy, established 1952, painted in gold lettering across the front glass. Elena arrived on a Monday morning in early September when the late summer heat still shimmered off the pavement. Dr. Keene met her at the pharmacy to hand over the keys and walk her through the basic operations. He was a thin, nervous man in his 70s, with trembling hands and eyes that seemed to avoid direct contact. "Simple operation," he said as he led her through the cramped aisles. "Nothing complicated. Most prescriptions come from Dr. Morrison at the medical clinic down the street. He has been treating folks here for 20 years, knows what everyone needs." The computer system was outdated but functional, and the inventory was well organized according to a system Dr. Keene had obviously perfected over decades of practice. What struck Elena immediately was the unusual uniformity of the medication stock. Most of the shelf space was devoted to a single prescription medication called cognizine, stored in industrial-sized bottles that suggested massive consumption. "We go through quite a bit of that one," Dr. Keene explained when he noticed her examining the cognizine inventory. "Most common prescription in town. Dr. Morrison writes it for just about everyone." Elena nodded. Though she was not familiar with cognizine from her years of pharmacy experience, she made a mental note to research the medication once she had settled into her new routine. Dr. Keene completed his walkthrough quickly, as though eager to leave, and handed her a thick binder containing customer records and prescription histories. "Everything you need is in there," he said, already moving toward the door. "Dr. Morrison will be by later to introduce himself." "Good luck, Miss Rodriguez." Elena spent her first day familiarizing herself with the operations and reviewing customer files. What became immediately apparent was Dr. Keene's observation about the uniformity of prescriptions. According to the records, approximately 90% of Millbrook's adult population was taking cognizine, usually in identical dosages prescribed by Dr. Morrison. That medication was typically prescribed for something called chronic cognitive resistance syndrome, which Elena had never encountered in her pharmaceutical education or professional experience. When Dr. Morrison visited the pharmacy that afternoon, Elena's first impression was of a competent, professional physician who seemed genuinely concerned about his patients' well-being. He was a man in his 50s with graying hair and the confident manner of someone accustomed to being the definitive medical authority in his community. "Dr. Keene tells me you have extensive experience in clinical pharmacy," he said as he reviewed several prescription orders. "That is excellent. The people of Millbrook have some unique medical needs that require careful attention to detail." Elena seized the opportunity to ask about cognizine. "I noticed that medication makes up a large portion of our prescription volume. I am not familiar with chronic cognitive resistance syndrome from my previous experience." Dr. Morrison paused in his review of the prescriptions, studying Elena with an expression she could not quite interpret. "It is a relatively rare condition that seems to occur with unusual frequency in certain rural communities," he said carefully. "The symptoms include difficulty accepting new information, resistance to changes in routine, and what we might call cognitive inflexibility. Left untreated, it can lead to serious social and psychological complications." "I see," Elena replied. and cognizine is effective in treating these symptoms. Remarkably so, Dr. Morrison confirmed. We have seen excellent results in maintaining community, stability, and individual well-being. I would be happy to provide you with some clinical literature on the subject. That evening, Alina attempted to research chronic cognitive resistance syndrome and cognizine through medical databases and pharmaceutical references. What she discovered was deeply troubling. Neither the condition nor the medication appeared in any legitimate medical literature. The physician's desk reference contained no entry for cognizine, and searches through medical journals produced no results. Even more concerning, when she attempted to trace the medication's manufacturer through the lot numbers on the inventory, she found no record of the supposed pharmaceutical company. Over the next several days, Alina began paying closer attention to her interactions with Millbrook's residents as they came to fill their prescriptions. What she observed was a community that functioned with an almost mechanical uniformity. Customers arrived at predictable times, requested their medications with identical phrasing, and responded to questions or conversation with remarkably similar expressions and speech patterns. No one complained about side effects, no one asked questions about dosages, and no one expressed any curiosity about their medical treatment. More disturbing was what Alina began to notice about the few residents who were not taking cognizine. These individuals, mostly recent arrivals to the community or temporary workers, behaved differently from the established population. They asked questions, expressed opinions, and demonstrated the kind of individual personality traits that seemed completely absent among the medication-compliant residents. Alina's growing concern reached a critical point when she decided to examine the actual contents of the cognizine tablets. Using the basic testing equipment, she discovered that the medication contained no active pharmaceutical ingredients that appeared in any reference materials. Instead, the tablet seemed to consist primarily of a complex compound that she could not identify, combined with what appeared to be synthetic proteins and trace amounts of heavy metals. On a Friday evening in late September, Alina confronted Dr. Morrison with her findings when he arrived to review prescription orders for the weekend. "I need to ask you some direct questions about cognizine," she said, locking the front door to ensure privacy. "I cannot find any legitimate medical literature supporting the existence of chronic cognitive resistance syndrome, and my analysis of the medication suggests it contains no recognized pharmaceutical compounds. Double quotes. Dr. Morrison set down his clipboard and studied Alina with an expression of weary resignation. "How much of the medication have you handled since you arrived?" The question struck Alina as odd, but she answered honestly, "I dispense it multiple times daily." "Why would that matter?" "Because the compound is absorbed through skin contact," Dr. Morrison replied. "You have been exposed to it for 3 weeks now, though apparently not enough to achieve full therapeutic levels." Alina felt a chill of fear run through her. "What exactly are you telling me?" Dr. Morrison walked to the pharmacy counter and leaned against it, suddenly looking much older than his years. "Millbrook has been part of a controlled social experiment for the past 20 years. The medication, as cognizine, is designed to reduce individual cognitive resistance to group consensus. It makes people more compliant, more accepting of authority, and less likely to question established social structures." "That is impossible," Alina said. Though even as she spoke, she realized that it explained everything she had observed about the community's behavior patterns. "Is it?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Look around you. Look at how smoothly this community functions. No crime, no social unrest, no political divisions. Everyone works together. Everyone accepts their role, and everyone contributes to the common good. It is what every government dreams of achieving." Alina backed away from the counter, her mind racing. "You're drugging an entire community without their knowledge or consent. They consented when they chose to live here and accept medical treatment," Dr. Morrison replied, "and the results speak for themselves. This is the most stable, productive, and harmonious community in the state of Kansas. What happens to people who refuse the medication?" Dr. Morrison's expression darkened. "There have been very few who have tried. Most find that life becomes quite difficult when they cannot integrate with the social structure. They usually choose to relocate." Alina realized with growing horror that her own situation was becoming precarious. "And if I refuse to continue dispensing this medication, that would be unfortunate," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "For you and for the community." Dr. Keene was beginning to ask similar questions before he retired. His health problems became quite severe once he stopped handling the medication. Regularly, Alina understood the implicit threat. Her exposure to the compound through routine handling had apparently provided some level of protection. but withdrawing that exposure could result in serious health consequences. More importantly, she was now part of a system that had been operating successfully for decades, and her continued cooperation was not really optional. That night, Alina sat in her small apartment above the pharmacy, staring out at the quiet streets of Millbrook. The community was exactly as Dr. Morrison had described it: peaceful, orderly, and harmonious. Children played safely in the streets, neighbors helped each other with routine tasks, and everyone seemed genuinely content with their lives. There was no violence, no addiction, no social problems that plagued other communities. But there was also no real choice, no individual expression, and no authentic human diversity. The residents of Millbrook had traded their cognitive freedom for social stability, and most of them did not even realize what they had lost. Alina made her decision over the weekend. On Monday morning, she began systematically documenting everything she had learned about the Cognizine program, preparing detailed records that could be used as evidence if the opportunity ever arose to expose the experiment. She continued dispensing the medication, maintaining her cover while secretly working to understand the full scope of the operation. What she discovered over the following months was that Millbrook was not unique. Similar programs were operating in small communities across several states, or coordinated through a network of government contractors and complicit medical professionals. The goal was to develop techniques for large-scale social control that could eventually be implemented in urban areas during times of civil unrest or political instability. Alina Rodriguez continues to work as the pharmacist in Millbrook, Kansas, dispensing Cognizine to a population that remains blissfully unaware of their chemical dependency. She has learned to handle the medication with gloves and protective equipment, minimizing her own exposure while maintaining the appearance of compliance. Her documentation of the program grows more comprehensive each month, and she waits for the right moment to reveal the truth about America's most successful social experiment. Every prescription she fills represents another day of lost freedom for the residents of Millbrook, but also another piece of evidence in what may someday become the most important whistleblower case in American history. Until then, she remains the keeper of a terrible secret, watching over a community that has chosen chemical peace over cognitive liberty, one prescription at a time. Story 3. The Whitman family drove 12 hours to Cedar Falls, Oregon for their daughter's college interview. They arrived on a Tuesday. The problem: every single person in town insisted it was Saturday and they had been expected for the school board meeting. Robert Whitman had been planning this trip for months. His daughter Sarah was a high school senior with excellent grades and test scores, and she had received an interview invitation from Cedar Falls College, a small liberal arts institution with a reputation for academic excellence and personalized attention. The college was not well known outside the Pacific Northwest, but Sarah's guidance counselor had spoken highly of their environmental science program, and the financial aid package they had offered made the education surprisingly affordable. The drive from Denver had taken them through some of the most beautiful countryside Robert had ever seen, winding through mountain passes and dense forests before descending into the valleys of western Oregon. Sarah sat in the passenger seat reviewing her interview notes and application materials, while Robert's wife Margaret dozed in the back seat after taking the overnight driving shift through Utah and Idaho. They had planned to arrive in Cedar Falls by early afternoon, giving Sarah time to tour the campus and prepare for her interview the following morning. Cedar Falls was smaller than they had expected, tucked into a valley between forested hills and bisected by a creek that gave the town its name. The main street featured a collection of well-maintained buildings that appeared to date from the early 1900s, with the college campus visible on a rise overlooking the downtown area. Everything looked exactly as it had in the promotional material Sarah had received, from the ivy-covered brick buildings to the mature oak trees lining the campus walkways. Robert parked their rental car in front of the Cedar Falls Inn, a charming bed and breakfast that had been recommended by the college admissions office. The proprietor, a friendly woman in her 50s named Helen Morrison, greeted them warmly at the front desk. "Welcome to Cedar Falls," she said with a genuine smile. "You must be the Whitman family. We have been expecting you." "Thank you," Robert replied. "We have reservations for 2 nights. My daughter has an interview at the college tomorrow." Helen paused in her review of the guest register, looking up at Robert with a slightly puzzled expression. "Tomorrow, but the school board meeting is tonight. Sarah is expected to present her proposal at 7 o'clock. Sarah looked up from her phone where she had been checking her interview confirmation email. "I think there might be some confusion. My interview is scheduled for Wednesday morning at 10 with the admissions committee." "Oh my." Helen said, consulting a large calendar on the wall behind the desk. Today is Saturday, dear. The school board meets every Saturday evening during the academic year. Your interview presentation is this evening. Robert felt a flicker of confusion. He pulled out his own phone to check the date, which clearly displayed Tuesday, October 15th. I think there might be some mistake. Today is Tuesday. Helen looked at him with the patient expression of someone correcting a minor but persistent error. No, dear. Today is Saturday, October 19th. I understand the drive from Denver can be disorienting, but I am quite certain about the date. Margaret stirred from her travel fatigue and joined the conversation at the front desk. We left Denver on Sunday morning, she said. It is definitely Tuesday afternoon now. Helen's expression shifted to one of gentle concern, as though she were dealing with guests who had suffered some form of travel-related confusion. Why don't we get you settled in your rooms and then you can speak with Dr. Patterson at the college? I'm sure he can clarify the schedule for Sarah's presentation tonight. The Whitman family exchanged uncertain glances but accepted their room keys and carried their luggage upstairs. Their rooms were comfortable and well appointed with views of the college campus and the surrounding hills. Once they were alone, Robert immediately called the college admissions office to clarify the confusion about dates and interview schedules. Cedar Falls College. How may I help you? The receptionist's voice was cheerful and professional. This is Robert Whitman. My daughter Sarah has an interview scheduled for tomorrow morning, but there seems to be some confusion about the date. We were told that today is Saturday and that she is expected to make a presentation this evening.
Yes.
Mr. Whitman, Sarah's presentation to the school board is scheduled for 7 tonight. The entire community is looking forward to hearing her proposal for improving environmental sustainability on campus. Robert felt a growing sense of disorientation. I am sorry, but there must be some mistake. Sarah applied for admission to your environmental science program. She was not asked to prepare any kind of presentation, and she certainly was not told about a school board meeting. But that is exactly what her application indicated. The receptionist replied with unshakable certainty. She specifically requested the opportunity to address the community about environmental initiatives. The school board meeting is the perfect forum for that kind of presentation. What day of the week is today? Robert asked directly. Saturday, of course. October 19th, the school board always meets on Saturday evenings. Robert ended the call and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. According to every electronic device the family possessed, including their phones, laptop, and the car's GPS system, today was Tuesday, October 15th, but everyone in Cedar Falls insisted it was Saturday, October 19th, and they all seemed to have detailed knowledge of commitments and expectations that the Whitman family had never made. Sarah knocked on her parents' door, entering with her laptop open to her email account. I have been going through all my communications with the college, she said. There is definitely no mention of any presentation or school board meeting. My interview is supposed to be tomorrow morning with Dr. Peterson from the admissions committee. Dr. Patterson, Margaret corrected automatically, then stopped. Wait, who is Dr. Peterson? Sarah checked her email again. Dr. Rebecca Peterson, Director of Admissions. She is the one who sent me the interview confirmation and the campus visit information. Margaret pulled out the folder of materials they had brought for the trip. According to the IN's information, the college administrator was Dr. Patterson, not Peterson. The family spent the next hour reviewing all their documentation and communications regarding Sarah's college visit. The electronic records on Sarah's phone and laptop consistently showed an interview scheduled with Dr. Rebecca Peterson for Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock a.m., but the printed materials they had received, including the campus map and local information packet, all referred to Dr. Thomas Patterson and mentioned Saturday evening community events. As the afternoon progressed, the Whitman family ventured into downtown Cedar Falls to explore and perhaps find some clarification about the date confusion. What they discovered was a community that functioned with absolute certainty about the current day being Saturday. The post office displayed Saturday hours. Local businesses were operating on weekend schedules, and residents they encountered spoke naturally about weekend activities and plans. More unsettling was the fact that multiple residents approached them with specific knowledge about Sarah's expected presentation to the school board. A local shopkeeper mentioned looking forward to hearing her ideas about solar energy implementation. A restaurant owner asked whether she would be discussing recycling programs or focusing more on sustainable agriculture. Every person they met seemed to know details about a presentation that Sarah had never prepared and commitments she had never made. By 6 in the evening, The family found themselves walking toward the high school where the school board meeting was apparently being held. They had not made a conscious decision to attend, but the social pressure and consistent expectations of the entire community had gradually worn down their resistance. Sarah carried a hastily prepared folder of notes about environmental science topics. Though she had no clear idea what she was expected to present, the high school gymnasium was filled with residents who greeted the Whitman family like old friends attending a long-anticipated event. The school board members, all of whom seemed to know Sarah personally, despite having never met her before, welcomed her to the podium with warm enthusiasm. Sarah Whitman, announced the board chairwoman, a distinguished elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes. We are so pleased that you have chosen Cedar Falls for your educational journey. Please share with us your vision for environmental leadership in our community. Sarah found herself walking to the front of the gymnasium, though she could not remember making the decision to do so. The audience looked at her with expectant, supportive faces, as though they had been waiting months for this moment. Her parents sat in the front row, looking as confused as she felt, but somehow unable to object or leave. I believe, Sarah began, surprising herself by speaking without conscious intention, that sustainable living requires community cooperation and long-term commitment to environmental stewardship. The words seemed to come from somewhere outside her conscious mind, flowing naturally as though she had rehearsed this presentation many times before. She spoke for 20 minutes about solar energy, organic agriculture, waste reduction, and community gardens, covering topics she had studied but presenting them with a depth and specificity that she did not remember possessing. The audience responded with enthusiasm and appreciation, asking thoughtful questions that Sarah answered with expertise she did not recognize as her own. The school board members took detailed notes and expressed genuine interest in implementing her suggestions as part of the college's environmental program. When the presentation concluded, the community gave Sarah a standing ovation and multiple residents approached to discuss specific aspects of her proposals. Dr. Patterson, who had apparently been in the audience throughout the meeting, congratulated her on an excellent presentation and confirmed her acceptance into the college's environmental science program. We will see you Monday morning for orientation, he said with a warm handshake. Your dormitory assignment and class schedule are already prepared. Sarah looked at him with growing alarm. I have not accepted admission yet. I was only here for an interview. Dr. Patterson looked puzzled. But you just presented your enrollment commitment to the entire school board. Your parents signed the enrollment documents this afternoon. Robert and Margaret exchanged startled glances. They had no memory of signing any documents. But when Dr. Patterson produced the paperwork, their signatures were clearly visible on official enrollment forms dated Saturday, October 19th. The Whitman family returned to the Cedar Falls in a state of profound confusion and growing panic. According to all their electronic devices, it was still Tuesday evening. But according to everyone in Cedar Falls, Saturday was ending and Sunday would begin at midnight. More critically, they seemed to have committed Sarah to enrolling in a college program she had only intended to explore, and they had no clear memory of making that decision. Margaret discovered that their return airline tickets had been changed to the following weekend, with confirmation emails that she did not remember receiving. Their hotel reservation in Denver had been cancelled with charges for early cancellation that appeared on Robert's credit card statement, despite his certainty that he had never authorized such changes. Over the next several days, which the family experienced as Wednesday through Friday, but which the residents of Cedar Falls consistently identified as Sunday through Tuesday, the Whitmans found themselves increasingly integrated into the community's expectations and schedules. Sarah attended orientation sessions and campus activities that she had not registered for, but which everyone expected her to participate in. Robert and Margaret were enrolled in parent activities and community service projects that they could not remember agreeing to join. Most disturbing was their gradual realization that their own memories and perceptions were becoming less reliable. Electronic evidence of their original plans and timeline began to contradict their lived experience. Phone calls to friends and family back in Denver confirmed that they had been gone for exactly the length of time that Cedar Falls residents claimed, not the shorter period they remembered. By the end of the week, the Whitman family had accepted that Sarah would be enrolling at Cedar Falls College, though none of them could clearly explain how that decision had been made. Their return trip to Denver felt surreal, as though they were leaving a place that had somehow expanded to contain more time than should have been possible. Sarah began her studies at Cedar Falls College that following month, though she never lost a feeling that she had committed to something she did not fully understand. Her parents returned to Denver with memories of a successful college visit and a sense of pride in their daughter's achievement, but also with a lingering uncertainty about what had actually transpired. During their time in Cedar Falls, the Whitman family never spoke publicly about their experience in Cedar Falls, though they occasionally discussed among themselves the persistent feeling that they had lost several days, somewhere in the valley between the Oregon hills. Sarah completed her degree in environmental science and went on to a successful career in renewable energy, though she always avoided returning to Cedar Falls despite multiple invitations from the college and the community. The town of Cedar Falls continues to welcome prospective students and their families, always with the same warm hospitality and detailed knowledge of commitments that visitors never remember making. Time moves differently there, expanding to accommodate the community's needs and expectations, ensuring that every visitor leaves with exactly the experience they were supposed to have, whether they planned for it or not. Story 4. After months of unemployment, Derek Thompson finally found work at the only factory in Broken Arrow, Montana. The pay was excellent, the hours were overnight, and there was just one rule: never look outside during your shift. Derek had been out of work for 8 months when the job posting appeared online. The description was straightforward: an overnight manufacturing technician was needed. No experience required, with a starting wage of $35 an hour. For someone burning through his savings, it seemed too good to be true. The phone interview was conducted by a woman named Patricia Vance from Human Resources. Her questions were standard, but when Derek asked about the nature of the work, her response was vague. "We produce specialized components for government contracts," she explained. "Nothing dangerous, but it requires strict adherence to security protocols." Derek accepted the position immediately and drove the 6 hours to Broken Arrow the following week. The town was tiny, with just a few hundred residents. The Broken Arrow manufacturing facility sat on a hill overlooking the town, a modern, single-story building surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Patricia Vance met him at the main entrance on his first evening. She was a thin woman in her 40s with a severe demeanor. She led him through a series of security checkpoints into a sterile, immaculately clean interior that felt more like a medical lab than a factory. "Your workstation is in production room 12, Patricia explained, stopping at one of many identical doors. "You will be assembling electronic components according to detailed specifications." She handed him a thick manual. "But there is one rule that supersedes everything else. Under no circumstances are you to look outside during your shift. The windows are covered for security reasons. Do not remove the coverings. Violation will result in immediate termination and possible legal consequences." Derek nodded, though the instruction struck him as oddly specific. Production room 12 was a windowless, isolated space. His first shift passed without incident. The work was repetitive but engaging, and he exceeded his production quota. Patricia inspected his work at 6 a.m. and seemed pleased. He settled into a comfortable routine over the next several weeks, but during his 4th week, he began to hear sounds. Around midnight, low rumbling noises echoed from outside the building, rhythmic and mechanical, like heavy machinery operating in the distance. As the nights passed, the sounds became more distinct: large vehicles moving across the parking lot, metallic scraping, and the distant hum of electrical equipment. Most disturbing were the occasional sounds that resembled human voices, though he could never make out specific words. Derek's curiosity grew stronger each evening, but he remembered Patricia's strict warning. The breaking point came during his 6th week when he heard sounds that were unmistakably human screaming. The noise lasted for several minutes before being abruptly cut off by the sound of heavy machinery starting up without conscious decision. Derek stood and walked to the wall, running his hands along the smooth surface. He found the edges of the blackout material. He worked one corner loose enough to create a small gap. What Derek saw through that gap changed everything. The parking lot was filled with military vehicles, including armored personnel carriers. Soldiers in full combat gear moved efficiently between them. Most disturbing was a group of civilians in restraints being transferred from a truck to a separate building behind the main facility. Derek quickly replaced the covering and returned to his workbench, his hands shaking. The electronic components he'd been assembling for weeks suddenly took on a sinister new significance. He was an unwitting participant in some kind of military or intelligence operation. The remainder of his shift passed in a haze of fear. When Patricia arrived to dismiss him, he struggled to maintain his normal routine. As he drove toward town, he noticed a black sedan following him at a discreet distance. It remained parked across the street from his rented room, its occupants apparently maintaining surveillance on him. Over the next several days, Derek found himself under constant observation. His attempts to use the internet at the library were blocked, and phone calls to friends went straight to voicemail with no return calls. He was trapped, unable to leave or communicate with the outside world. On his next shift, Patricia confronted him directly. "We have detected irregularities, specifically, evidence of tampering with the window coverings." Derek tried to deny it, but she cut him off. "Mr. Thompson, the work you are doing here serves vital national security interests. Violations are treated as potential threats to national security." However, she then became conciliatory. "We recognize that curiosity is natural. We are prepared to offer you additional compensation and benefits in recognition of your valuable contributions." She handed him a revised contract with a significant salary increase and extended benefits. In return, he would commit to 2 more years with strict adherence to all security protocols. Derek understood he was being offered a choice between comfortable compliance and unspecified, severe consequences. Derek Thompson continues to work the overnight shift at the Broken Arrow manufacturing facility, assembling electronic components under strict security protocols. His salary has increased substantially, and his housing has been upgraded. He no longer attempts to look outside, having learned that some forms of curiosity carry consequences that extend far beyond simple job termination. The sounds of military vehicles and occasional human distress continue each night, but Derek has trained himself to focus exclusively on his work. The black sedan no longer follows him, though he remains aware that his movements and communications are monitored. He has learned to find satisfaction in his work and his financial security, participating in a system that operates according to rules and purposes he is not meant to comprehend, only to serve with unquestioning diligence. Story 5, Real Estate Agent. Patricia Mills thought she had found the perfect listing in Harmony Ridge, Tennessee. Every house was for sale, every price was $1, and every seller had the exact same reason for leaving. The welcome committee made us an offer. Patricia had been working real estate in Nashville for 15 years when she received the inquiry. The caller, Mayor Franklin Dobbs, explained the entire community was undergoing a voluntary relocation initiative. Every homeowner had decided to sell simultaneously. The financial details were unbelievable. Every house was priced at $1, with the condition that new owners commit to living there for 5 years and participate actively in local government. She drove to Harmony Ridge and discovered a thriving, prosperous-looking town, not the depressed community she had expected. Mayor Dobbs gave her a tour of approximately 300 beautiful homes, all with for sale signs. The current residents were oddly formal and synchronized, all providing identical reasons for leaving about new opportunities. And the welcome committee's generous offer that evening. She stayed at a local inn run by a couple named the Washingtons. When she asked them about their decision to sell, they used the same practiced phrasing. "The welcome committee made us an offer we could not refuse." When she pressed for details, they became vague and uncomfortable. The next morning, Patricia investigated at the county courthouse. She discovered that all the homes had been purchased over the past 20 years by the same entity, the Harmony Ridge Community Development Corporation, HRCDC, which was owned by a series of holding companies that obscured its ultimate ownership. She also learned the population remained stable at around 800 people, but the individual identities of the residents changed every few years. Returning to town, she met with families preparing to move. Each had been presented with attractive relocation opportunities that perfectly matched their skills: a solar energy job in Arizona, an organic farm in Vermont, a forestry project in Oregon. When she asked how the committee knew about these opportunities, Mrs. Martinez replied, "They have connections everywhere." That evening, Mayor Dobbs invited her to a welcome committee meeting. She learned the committee of 7 individuals controlled every aspect of life in Harmony Ridge, from job assignments to social relationships. They presented detailed profiles of potential new residents, having thoroughly investigated them through processes that seemed to extend far beyond normal background checks. After the meeting, Catherine, the external relations coordinator, approached her. "We have been reviewing your background, and we believe you would be an excellent addition to our community." Patricia was offered a job and a beautiful home to relocate permanently. When she hesitated, Catherine's tone shifted. "The welcome committee's policies require that anyone with detailed knowledge of our operations either join the community or sign very comprehensive confidentiality agreements with significant consequences for violations." Patricia realized she had learned too much to simply walk away. Mills currently serves as the property management coordinator for the Harmony Ridge Community Development Corporation. Having accepted the offer to relocate, she lives in a beautiful Victorian house and specializes in helping new residents transition into the Harmony Ridge lifestyle. She rarely thinks about the questions that initially brought her there. The Welcome Committee continues to coordinate relocation programs, seeking people who value tradition and respect authority. Their success rate in creating stable, harmonious communities is remarkable. Every house remains available for $1, with the condition that new owners commit to living according to the community's values. The Welcome Committee's offer is always generous, and their methods are always effective in helping people find exactly the kind of life they never knew they wanted. Story 6. Pastor Michael Barnes accepted the position at Saints Rest Methodist Church sight unseen. When he arrived for his first potluck dinner, he discovered why the congregation was so eager to hire him. He was the main course. The call had come at the right time. After 15 years in stressful urban ministries, the offer from the small rural congregation included a substantial salary, a beautiful parsonage, and the promise of a devoted congregation. The phone interview with Deacon Walter Fitzgerald was encouraging. They emphasized the importance of fellowship meals, particularly a weekly potluck dinner with universal participation. The drive to Saints Rest, Nebraska revealed a larger than expected, prosperous community. The church was an impressive Gothic revival structure. Deacon Fitzgerald and his wife Martha welcomed him warmly and emphasized the importance of the Sunday evening potluck, a tradition that was the heart of their community life. Sunday morning's service was wonderful, filled with a warm and reverent congregation. Everyone expressed excitement about the evening's potluck. That afternoon, Michael prepared his grandmother's famous cornbread to contribute. When he arrived at the fellowship hall that evening, it was decorated beautifully, but the arrangement was unusual. The food was arranged in a circle around a single, decorated chair that resembled a throne. The congregation stood around it, holding hands and speaking in low, reverent tones. Deacon Fitzgerald guided Michael to the chair. "Please take your place of honor so we can begin our traditional blessing." Feeling uncomfortable but wanting to respect tradition, Michael sat. The congregation joined hands around him, and an elaborate prayer began, focusing as much on Michael personally as on divine providence. As the prayer concluded, Michael noticed the expressions around him had shifted from enthusiasm to something intense and focused. The church secretary, Mrs. Hensley, approached him carrying a large carving knife and a serving platter. "Pastor Barnes," she said, "we are so grateful that you have come to feed us. Now it is time for you to provide the nourishment that our community needs." Michael tried to stand, but several congregation members moved closer, their hands resting firmly on his shoulders and arms, preventing him from rising. "I think there might be some misunderstanding," Michael said. "I brought cornbread to share." Deacon Fitzgerald stepped forward. "Pastor Barnes, you misunderstand your role. We called you here not to lead us in worship, but to provide us with the spiritual sustenance that only a true shepherd can offer to his flock." Martha Fitzgerald spoke from the circle. "The previous pastors understood their calling. Reverend Kemp served us faithfully for 30 years, providing spiritual nourishment whenever the community required it." Michael realized with horror that they were describing a pattern of pastoral tenure that ended with sacrifice. The potluck, the central chair, the carving knifey was the guest of honor at a different kind of feast. "You cannot be serious," he said, struggling again to rise. "This is insane. I am calling the police." The hands on his shoulders tightened. Deacon Fitzgerald approached with apparent compassion. "Our traditions may seem unusual, but rural communities have different ways of ensuring spiritual health. We have been practicing our form of communion for over a century." Mrs. Hensley approached with the knife. "Do not be afraid, Pastor Barnes. Your sacrifice will nourish us spiritually and physically for months to come. You will become part of us in the most literal way possible." As Mrs. Hensley raised the carving knife and the congregation began singing an unfamiliar hymn, Michael understood his ministry would indeed involve the ultimate sacrifice. The Saints Rest Methodist Church continues to welcome new pastors with enthusiasm and traditional rural hospitality. Their pastoral search committee maintains active relationships with seminaries, known for offering competitive packages. Their potluck dinners remain central to community life, and their communion services are described as particularly meaningful. Pastor Michael Barnes served the Saints Rest congregation faithfully, providing exactly the kind of leadership and spiritual sustenance the community required. His ministry was brief but deeply meaningful, and his contribution continues to nourish the faithful members of this devoted rural church.